Hey folks, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another one of our weekly id invaded discussion videos, and today we're here to talk all about episode 5, Fallen. But before we get into things, I do want to give a big thank you to those of you who shared last week's video over on Twitter. At Bubba Lubber, at Anime Trashbin, at Leia Hime, at Clockwork Cams, at Veridin Main, at Luwu is Uwu, at Zyphery, and at Deep Not That Deep. Thanks so much for sharing last week's video, everybody, and if you too would like to have your name shouted out in next week's id invaded video, then be sure to share this video around on the internet, and then tag me at JoJo Talks Too Much over on Twitter, and I will be sure to shout your name out in next week's video. Yes, indeed, my friends, it is once again time for another fun-filled episode of id invaded. What fun does Aoki have up his sleeve for us this week? And well, my friends, it is more insanity. Because this week there is, the continuation, I was going to say conclusion, but it's more like the continuation of the Gravedigger case. As we remember from last week, the Gravedigger that we thought we were chasing was actually just a copycat. This week we actually do get to encounter the Gravedigger, and it turns out that we actually encountered them last week. Yes, indeed, that's because Haruka Kazuta, the dude who randomly just strolled up and kissed Hondomachi like out of the blue and closed the episode, that craziness from last week, that actually continues straight, this week picks up directly with that. And we find out that it was indeed Haruka Kazuta who was the Gravedigger all along. Or was he? I mean, he is, but he may have an accomplice. Mystery. When you get down to it, I suppose there's really two key factors in the episode for me. The first being Hondomachi, and the second being the Gravedigger case itself. And I find it really interesting how these two connect, especially in relation to the episode title, Fallen. Since Fallen as a title can really be sort of labeled and thrown at several things that happened in this week's episode. One of which is a bit of a stretch, the other one is incredibly literal, and one is sort of like ironic. The literal interpretation of the episode title is straight up when Saikato just comes plummeting out of the damn sky. The ironic one being that Fallen, as in like the girl who they go to visit, Inami, has fallen for Kazuta. Kazuta has fallen for Inami. There's like some lovey-dovey crap tossed in there as well, even though it's very twisted. And the one that's a bit of a stretch, and it's the one that I sort of connected with, is the idea that Hondomachi is falling into certain traps that I think Saikato started to fall into. I'm worried about Hondomachi in a lot of ways. Ever since she got this drill upside the head, I've been a little bit concerned about her, and they have a scene where they question whether or not the drill affects people differently, and how it would damage the brain and possibly change certain people. And it made Kazuta seemingly, it screwed his urge to kill and sort of crossed that with his urge to kiss, which is bizarre. And it's sort of warped his brain a little bit. And that's why he ends up kissing Hondomachi last week, because he had actually intended to kill her there. The idea was that she had caught him and he couldn't let anybody know that he was alive, so he went in to kill her. But instead he kissed her, since when he was drilled upside the head by the driller killer, it screwed up his brain, and it actually kind of mashed together the parts that want to kiss and the parts that want to kill. Those urges have sort of shattered and broken. And it's interesting because Hondomachi is sort of flustered by this, which I thought was like a little bit weird. They established Hondomachi as like 23, so she should have probably been kissed by now, or at the very least had relationships by now. But she's very clearly flustered by it. I thought that was weird. I was like, okay, interesting choice for Hondomachi, but it does sort of fit within the personality they've set up for her character, so it's not like a total like, what, that doesn't make any sense. But it was just sort of odd. And then we have Hondomachi slowly start to put the pieces together in a way that I definitely wouldn't have. And she realizes, like, why was he there? why would he do that? Like, why did he kiss me? That was really random. He also had a drill into his head, so maybe that screwed with him. And she basically puts the pieces together in such a way that it's definitely a big leap of logic. But once Hondomachi explains it to Matsuoka, her partner, the old man kind of is like, oh my god, you're totally right. Like, this could be the guy. She basically makes the assumption that since his brain was scrambled by the drill, it crossed his urge to kill with his urge to kiss, and that's why at the scene of the crime every time they don't find the particles they need to get the idwell going. They actually, the reason why they haven't been able to track this guy, the reason why they haven't been able to find his urge to kill, those particles that they need to jump into the thing, is because he doesn't have an urge to kill when he's kidnapping people. He actually has an urge to kiss them, and that's the particles that get left behind, and that doesn't come up on the little weird like device thing that they use to find the particles. So that's why they haven't been able to catch the guy for so long. I think it's a really interesting way to connect these separate episodes and these separate sort of mysteries all together. They are able to have these sort of episodic adventures where we're getting these interactions with these different serial killers and how the gang manages to get inside their id, figure out where they are, and then take them down. And it's been an interesting ride to watch, but what I think is most interesting is the fact that these characters don't just have episodic adventures. There is this overarching narrative running throughout the show as a whole, and that is genuinely hard to do, to have a overarching story within episodic adventures. And I think Id Invaded is handling that with total grace. I really dig how the overall story starts to become more and more clear as we go, and how these characters are slowly fleshing themselves out. So far, we came to know a lot about Sakaido. We're slowly learning a little bit more about the rest of the squad, and we're finally starting to get a little bit more character for Hondomachi. I shouldn't say finally, it's just that Hondomachi feels like if Sakaido's the main character, then Hondomachi, at least to me, feels like the secondary main character, since she seems to have the most going on, and I'm genuinely sort of surprised that she hasn't had some kind of conversation with Sakaido quite yet. I have a feeling if we ever do get that, it'll be after a big specific moment that I'm assuming is going to come just because tropes, but I have a feeling that these two will meet one day. Sakaido and Hondomachi will meet. And like I said earlier, I'm worried about Hondomachi because it seems as though she's falling into a bit of a darker streak. Hondomachi, when we first see her, she's tough, but she's still sort of shy and a bit nervous, and she still sort of holds on to that. But we're seeing her sort of fall into this detective mode where she's able to be cold and calculating, and she's the reason why they end up realizing that Inami is the reason why Kazuta is killing people. So seeing Hondomachi use those skills, it's impressive and it's hype, and I'm happy that she's gaining this real like detective spirit to her, and it's cool to see her solve the mystery and put the pieces together long ahead of Matsuoka, which I think is great. But I'm worried. Like, I'm just worried that because they established that the drill to the head can affect people in different ways and some people turn violent, I'm worried that this is going to have some sort of effect on Hondomachi's psyche. And while it's nice to see her be badass, I worry that maybe something might happen to her in terms of her personality, in terms of her demeanor. I'm a little bit concerned, but I think overall I'm pretty sure she'll be just fine. The other part of the episode, of course, that I want to get into is the Gravedigger case itself. The squad realizing that once Hondomachi puts the pieces together of how his everything operates, they're able to track down his urge to kill, those particles left behind when he kissed Hondomachi, because he wasn't trying to kiss her, he was trying to kill her. So they finally got the particles, they finally put the pieces together, and when they assemble his idwell, Sakaido basically gets predators'd. And if you don't know what predators'd means, go watch the movie Predators. It's actually a really underrated movie. It's not my favorite Predators movie. My favorite Predator movie is... Actually, you know what? I think Predators might be my favorite Predator movie, honestly. But basically, yeah, Sakaido just wakes up in the sky and is plummeting downwards and lands on a castle in the sky. No, it's not a castle, it's a house. But still, I couldn't help but make the reference. And it's interesting, right? So the house is falling, which means that some of the gravity is a little bit weird within the house. So there's this sort of like, not quite zero gravity, but it's interesting to look at, since Kaoru is like stabbed in the chest, and they realize like, okay, so Kaoru died by being stabbed in the chest, but the blood around her was pooled in such a way that it made this like perfect sheet under her because of the zero gravity, and there's like a person hiding underneath there, and that person turns out to be the victims of Kazuta, the Gravedigger. All those victims are one person, and they're sort of morphing into each other. You see like their eyes turn and like this beauty mark appear and disappear, and like their face sort of morphs into all these different faces. It's a cool effect, and I really, really dug the Idwell this time around. We don't get a whole bunch of it, but I liked the concept of this sort of island in the sky with this house on it. And what's even crazier is we actually get to see the return of John Walker in this. John Walker is underneath the house, and he's seemingly chopping up Kazuta. I'm not sure what that's supposed to represent, since we don't really know what John Walker represents at all. Is he a person in the real world? Is he the manifestation of some kind of my idea initially was that he is the manifestation that appears in all serial killers, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Kaoru appears within every serial killer, but we haven't seen John Walker in every serial killer. Or at the very least, we haven't seen... Actually, that's not true. It's not every serial killer. It's just every Idwell, for some reason, has Kaoru. And it's not just because of Sakaido, because the other guy, the driller killer, I can't remember his name right now, but he also had seen Kaoru within the Idwell. So I wonder if, like, what John Walker is meant to represent, and why is he here inside of Kazuta's brain? Why is he in Kazuta's id? That's interesting. I don't know what it could mean, but I'm curious. Also, this episode ends on a hell of a cliffhanger. Like, the bomb explodes. It seemingly kills that nice cop who works with them. I was a little bit sad to see him go. I feel like we barely even knew anything about him other than like, oh, he's the fun-loving cop, and he friggin' explodes, since it seemed that Kazuta like rigged the building to explode. The real-world version of that house that Sakaido's in. And then it ends with Hondomachi and Matsuoka cornering Inami, who it turns out that Inami is Kazuta's crush. And after Kazuta got the drill in his head, he started to kidnap these people and put them into bins because Inami is a friggin' sadist and likes to watch people get hurt or die. Which, like, what the hell? And that's where we leave the episode. It's some truly wild stuff. And I was really impressed with this week's episode. It wasn't like my favorite episode of Id Invaded, but it is genuinely something really interesting. With that said, though, everybody, I'm going to wrap up my thoughts here. If you haven't been keeping up, I don't really give ratings anymore. I'm trying to think of what I can replace ratings with. I'll keep you guys posted. But yeah, this was just a really solid episode, and I am very curious to see how the Gravedigger case wraps up next week. And that's going to do it for today's video, everybody, so I hope you guys enjoyed, and before we go, as always, I have to give a big thank you to the good folks over on Patreon, especially those in the Earl Grey tier: Andrew W., Calvin A., Crowbar of Irony, Daniel G., Digger the Fox, Dominic G., Ionos, Urza, Ginkutaku, Godzilla Fan, No For Nothing, Maria Teresa, Marshall B., Mirth Mouser, Cell, Shadow Creative, Sipco Games, Somastan, Stephen G., Sakochi, Tristan G., and Verdon. A huge thank you to all of you in the T Squadron for your continued support, and if you too would like to join the T Squadron, then be sure to check out the first link in the description to check out our Patreon page, see all the cool rewards you can get over there, as well as access to our Patreon exclusive Discord for as little as $1 a month. And with that said, we're going to wrap up today's video, everybody, so thank you all once again for watching, and if you are feeling stressed out today, then you go have yourself a warm cup of tea, and I will talk to you all again real soon.